Order. So welcome everyone to meeting number 22 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. The committee is meeting today as requested by 4 members of the committee per Standing Order 106 sub 4 to discuss their request to undertake a study of the NACI recommendations on the use of AstraZeneca vaccine. I would like to remind everyone that everyone has the right to participate in these proceedings in the official language of their choice. In the event that there is a difficulty in hearing translations, please bring it to our attention as soon as possible so that the matter can be resolved. And now we will go to Ms. Rumpel-Garner. If you wish to, please move your motion.
Thank you, Chair. And here we are again.
Excusez-moi. Monsieur le Président, j'attendais.
Excuse me. I was waiting for the translation. Excuse me. This was not translated. I didn't hear the translation, so I didn't hear the French translation. I don't know if there's any interpreter there, but I'm on the correct channel and there's no interpretation. It's possible that today's discussion will be technical, so I'm hoping to hear impeccable translation.
Maybe we
Monsieur Thériault. Mr. Clerk, I wonder if we could verify that translation
I'm told that everything is okay, so maybe you could speak just a little bit to make sure that in English.
Okay. Well, I'll kind of back up and start again. I'll say, welcome to meeting number 22 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. The committee is meeting as requested by 4 members of the committee for Standing Order 106 sub 4 to discuss their request to undertake a study of the NACI recommendations on the use of AstraZeneca vaccine. I would like to remind everyone that everyone has the right to participate in these proceedings in the official language of their choice. In the event that there is a difficulty in hearing translations, please bring it to our attention as soon as possible so that the matter can be resolved. How are we doing? Monsieur Thériault, c'est bon?
Mr. Thériault, it's fine.
Ms. Rumpel-Garner, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And just to confirm, I'm coming through loud and clear on the French translation line. We're good? Okay, awesome. All right, so here we are again. And I want to thank colleagues for coming to this meeting again during a parliamentary recess week. I will move the motion, but I want to put forward my rationale prior to doing so. So early in the week, we found out reports that the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, or NACI, has recommended against giving the AstraZeneca vaccine to Canadians age 65 and older, citing a lack of evidence that the vaccine is effective among this age group. So NACI has put forward concerns saying that the vaccine might not be effective in preventing severe effects of COVID-19. Then, after this recommendation came out, we found out that Health Canada, the department that's formally in charge of the final decision on who to recommend to give vaccines to, decided to put that advice aside and recommend that the AstraZeneca vaccine be given to seniors anyway. So for me as a parliamentarian, and then watching the subsequent fallout from provincial governments trying to decide if they would administer this vaccine to seniors or not, I mean, I'm an economist. I'm not an epidemiologist or a vaccine expert. I would really like to know why there's a discrepancy in these two recommendations. I think that it's really incumbent upon us to do that quickly, because the reason why we put forward a 1064 motion, we know that the AstraZeneca vaccine, I believe it has begun to arrive in Canada, and provinces will have to be making decisions on who to administer the vaccine to. So since seniors, we know that seniors are the most vulnerable to COVID, or among the most vulnerable to COVID, efficacy and the decision on whether or not to administer a vaccine based on efficacy should be a fairly relevant point of clarification for this committee. A couple of things, Chair, that I just want to point out in terms of rationale for wanting to have a meeting, just to have experts before our committee to explain the process one way or another. First of all, I really think it's important that all Canadians decide to take a vaccine for COVID-19. I think that this is going to be the #1 public health tool. It is so important. And I know, like, even just in reports in the media, given this conflicting information, that some seniors have said, okay, well, should I be taking this vaccine or not? Is it actually going to protect me? And I think that that is a relevant question for this committee to get answers from experts on very quickly. The second thing that I think the reason why this meeting would be so important is that perhaps it would provide some clarity for provincial colleagues or other health authorities on if other vaccines that are proven to be effective at a higher level of efficacy in that age group, the recommendation should be to prioritize those vaccines for that age group so that we're seeing maximum efficacy. I did pull off of the government's website the analysis. It's at table 11. It's an estimate of vaccine efficacy against the first occurrence of confirmed COVID-19 beginning greater or less than 15 days after dose 2 for the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I can send this to you, Chair, and to the clerk if need be. But this is the government's data on the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine in seniors, so age 65 plus. And what I see here is 43.2%. Now, the World Health Organization's guidelines for vaccine efficacy is 50%. And I believe that the Food and Drug Administration in the US is the same. I couldn't find our guidelines. This is something I'd like experts to explain to our committee. So this is less about having a political position, but more to suss this out with the experts in a vehicle that's not news articles that are conflicting. I noticed that when I was reading news articles as this story progressed this week, health experts are actually saying the messaging has been quite muddled. So I think we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to do it very quickly. And I think that this meeting would give an opportunity for both NACI and Health Canada to provide clear information and direction on whether or not seniors should be administered this vaccine, or if they should be prioritized to have other vaccines that have that very high proven efficacy in their age group. So I'd like to that to happen as soon as possible, and that's the reason for this meeting today. I know that it's come up. It's like, oh, we're having another 106.4 meeting. Yes, we are. But two things. First of all, it was a recess week. This news broke on a recess week, and unfortunately, the pandemic doesn't developments with the pandemic don't just occur on parliamentary sitting weeks. The urgency given the potential administration of the AstraZeneca vaccine is happening now. And as you are well aware, Chair, with all of the, dare I say it, drama that we've had in this committee, especially pertaining to getting meetings where we have adequate translation, I felt we needed to do that, and we needed to do it now. We haven't been successful in having subcommittee meetings because of quote unquote resources, so here we are today. So I hope that this can be perceived as a nonpartisan type of a motion. We just need some information. It just needs to be clear, and I think this will actually help all of our constituents and everybody that we represent across the country. So with that, I move that the committee invite the following representatives from the Public Health Agency of Canada to give a joint presentation of no more than 15 minutes. Roman Sumsky, the Senior Vice President of the Vaccine Acquisition Branch, Gina Charos and/or Stephen Brent, Director General level officials for the Center for Immunization and Respiratory Infectious Diseases, Kim Elmsley, the Vice President of the Immunization Branch, and that Dr. Carolyn Quach-Tan, Chair of the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, be invited to give a presentation of no more than 10 minutes. And that the above witnesses be asked to present on NACI's recommendation against using the AstraZeneca vaccine for Canadians 65 and older, reports that Health Canada will advise against the following, against following the advice from NACI, evidence that of the AstraZeneca vaccine's effectiveness in the age 65 and older cohort, and potential ramifications of administering and or not administering the AstraZeneca vaccine to persons age 65 and older in Canada, and that the witnesses present concurrently on one single panel and remain available for question rounds after the presentation, that the meeting be no less than 2 hours in duration, and that it be held no later than March 8th. 2021, which I realize is quickly setting upon us, Chair. So what I'm thinking here is that we have technical level experts from PHAC, the people who are actually doing the work of the recommendations, not just people that are out, sort of in the media every day. I want to hear from technical experts. And I'd like to have these two organizations side by side so that we can direct questions to them concurrently. I think that that's going to be very important. I think we have to do this as soon as possible. So yes, I hope that all members will agree and that we can move on with life and that we can get some information. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Wimple-Garner. Now I see Mr. Davies, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, in general, I support the substance of this motion. I think Michelle's made some important points. I mean, basically, we have AstraZeneca has just been approved. We know that doses are going to be arriving imminently to Canadians, and we also know that provinces have almost uniformly prioritized vaccination by age. So I think it's an extremely important question to this committee and to Canadians whether or not AstraZeneca is or is not effective in Canadians over the age of 65. I think we know that concern about vaccines, vaccine hesitancy, vaccine confidence is really important, and we have a major contradiction at the federal level, with one area of government saying that AstraZeneca is appropriate for people over 65, and another arm saying it doesn't do any good. So I think it's very important that we look into this, and I think it's a matter of, I don't think urgent, but I would say pressing concern. I'm going to say one thing I just want to make clear, and I'm sure Michelle didn't mean anything by this, but I've always been a very, very strong supporter of constituency weeks. This is not a recess week to me. It's not a break week. It is a constituency week. And constituency work, I think, is every bit as important work for parliamentarians as work that we do in the House. In fact, in some ways, I think it's more important, frankly, to many of the people in our ridings. So I just want to put that on the record because I don't want to leave the impression that if we're not meeting in a constituency week, that in any way suggests that we're not working or actively engaged. I want to say my only concern about this is the timing of it. Now, we're meeting on a Friday. The authors of this had the opportunity to choose the dates that they selected. They chose by March 8th, which is Monday. We have a meeting on Monday, and my understanding is that the witnesses that will be present on Monday have already been bumped once. These are witnesses that we've already selected, each of us, and I think they are higher up in the queue, and they have evidence every bit as important. One of them is Pfizer, for example. I would like to hear from Pfizer. And I have a boatload of questions that predate last week that are extremely important to people. And there are other that doesn't mean to single them out as more important than any of the other witnesses. They're all important. So I'm concerned about the timing of this. I will only support this motion if the meeting is held on either March 9th, 10th, or 11th. And I'll tell you why, because we also have the minister coming next Friday. So we have two extremely important meetings. already scheduled for next week, and I will not support a motion that bumps either of those two. But we will have to find another meeting slot. I also think it's not fair to the witnesses that we're going to call, who as of right now don't even know that they're set to be called for Monday. It's a Friday. And if we want these witnesses to come prepared to give solid information as committee, and frankly, if all of us can have time in order to prepare appropriate questions and do the research necessary to make the most out of that meeting, I don't think we should agree to a meeting on a Friday and call it for Monday. I don't see how having a meeting Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday next week, I don't see how that derogates in any way from the importance of this, and I think that we can find a time slot. Now, where I'll conclude is we perennially run up into this issue of whether or not we have slots or not. I don't know how that works. I'm not sure if we are able to come up with a different meeting time. So I'd like to hear from the clerk and maybe perhaps from Mr. Chair on that. I don't want to just have a knee-jerk reflex answer that no, we can't. Because I think we can. I think certainly there must be some capacity in the entire House of Commons to schedule an extraordinary meeting outside of normal time slots. But that will, I think, play a role in terms of my position on this, on supporting this motion, which once again I'll conclude by saying I think is very important. I want to thank my colleague for bringing it forward because I do think it's something that we need to look into. But it's a question of scheduling it, I think, in an appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. And I will advise that we have considered this matter at some length. I will ask the clerk if to please respond regarding the possibility of meeting during the week next week.
Adding a meeting during the week will be, it's very hard to have a time slot because all the committees are sitting. So I don't know, maybe on Friday it will be easier after our meeting with the minister, because if not, we'll need someone to be bumped from their regular committee so that we can have another additional meeting, either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So
thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll go now to Monsieur Thériault. Monsieur Thériault, allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I could make a suggestion, a compromise perhaps. I agree with the argument made by Mr. Davies with regards to the work that we do in our ridings. The Health Committee sits twice a week, and this leaves very little time available in our ridings, in our constituencies. This being said, what I've been trying to avoid for a year now with regards to the issue of managing this pandemic is to have reactions that are close to the news, and I try to look at the scientific advice and to stick to this. And when I see something on the news, I do some research and I try to see what this is based on. And so this run up to vaccines, where everyone really rushed in, made it so that we saw a lot of activity, and I do agree that we need to know if we should administer this vaccine to people of over 65 years of age. But on Tuesday, we were hearing on the news in Quebec that the Conservatives were asking for an emergency meeting, and the journalists were saying there was a link between the fact that we're going to receive 500,000 doses and 300,000 with a certain expiry date, and the Conservatives were saying there was an incoherence between NACI's guidelines and Health Canada, and with regards to approval. And so the impact is what we see here in the motion. That is, it creates some uncertainty, and I would like for us to be very careful and responsible in the way that we are going to deal with these subjects. We don't want to create the opposite effect of what we're trying to avoid here by the motion. And so the intention of the motion, I agree with it, but I don't want us to create an opposite effect. This being said, since the warning was made by NACI, I think that this was published well before the approval, I believe, or perhaps 2 weeks prior to approval. So there's a lot of water under the bridge. I mean, 1 year ago we had no vaccine. Now we're going to have several vaccine candidates that will arrive. And things are moving ahead very quickly. Things are moving quickly. And today we're hearing that studies on these age groups were done, especially with regards to AstraZeneca. And that these studies demonstrate that after a few weeks, after 2 weeks, the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines are equivalent if we look at efficacy rates. And today, what we're reading in the newspapers is that it was at 80% efficacy for people of over 70, over 80. And so we do have to have correct information, but the urgent nature of this is linked to the fact that we need to avoid to be so stuck on the daily news that we're creating emergencies that are based on older data. And this is a methodological concern that I have. And I think that it's our responsibility to be careful. Now, all of this being said, I was looking at the witnesses that we were going to hear speak, and we've pushed this back twice. Expert witnesses. We are not experts. Epidemiological experts, microbiological infection disease experts, and I thought, well, this is a wonderful opportunity to ask these questions to the witnesses that will appear on Monday and to ask all the questions. I'm looking forward to having their opinion on these points that are in the Conservative motion. What do they think about this? What is their opinion on this and other things? So at this point, I would like to say we have to go forward with our study, but I think that the compromise might be to add an extra hour to the Monday meeting. I think if we added an extra hour to Monday's meeting, we could hear the witnesses during the first and the second hour that were already scheduled, because experts are scheduled to testify, but they have other things to do rather than coming to appear before the committee, especially when they're working in infectious diseases and immunology, and they are experts. So I think that we do have to hear them during the first and second hour, and we can't show a lack of respect by not invite them, but we can have Caroline Quash and the PHAC representatives after. And then during the last hour, we will be able to ask questions. We will be very well equipped to ask the questions that we would like to ask on this specific subject. And according to the reactions that people might have, I'm suggesting this compromise. We don't have that many meetings to come, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done by committees, and we don't know because we're not sheltered from any other type of health crisis or any other type of crisis that might happen during this pandemic. So I would seize on the opportunity that our Monday witnesses that have been scheduled, and they've already been pushed back twice, they are extremely relevant, even with regards to this issue. And given that we will have clarified certain things, I think that 1 extra hour would be sufficient to ask the questions. So this is the compromise that I'm suggesting, and I would make an amendment to this effect. So in this hour, given that we know the situation around this subject, this is the first amendment that I would like to make, that the committee invite the following representatives of PHAC to make a joint presentation of a maximum duration of 10 minutes. Roman Zumsky, Gina Karas, or Stephen Bent, Kim Emsley. That doesn't change. And that Dr. Caroline Quash, Chair of NACI, be invited to make a presentation of a maximum duration of 7 minutes. That the witnesses be invited to make a presentation on 1, 2, 3. Okay, this remains unchanged. The ABCDs do not change. And then that the meeting of March the 8th, 2021 be held for a 3-hour period from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. That the witnesses participate in a 1-hour panel, that they be available during the last hour of the meeting from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. for a period of questions following their presentation. That the witnesses already scheduled for March the 8th, 2021 will appear at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. during a first and second panel of a duration of 1 hour each to make a presentation of approximately 5 minutes, and that they be available for question period following their presentation. They've already been contacted. They are ready. Caroline Quash was scheduled for March the 8th. We had met with her before, and I think that I'm looking for the French word. She was on standby. And Health Canada, I don't see how they can not be available, so that's impossible. I don't think that it would be a lack of respect asking them to appear for a 1-hour period on Monday. And I think that this way we're able to serve the interests of all, and it will allow us to clarify things more quickly. And we'd have in the same session, we'd hear extra experts in infectious diseases and epidemiology. So as I was speaking to you, I sent my amendment to the clerk. So this will allow people to reread the amendment. I will stop there.
Merci, monsieur. So the discussion at this point is on the amendment of Monsieur Thériault. And I see Mr. Fisher, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I was going to speak to the main motion, but I will speak to the amendment, and then I'll put my hand back up to speak to the main motion. I want to take a moment to thank Luc for that really thoughtful intervention. Also, Don touched on this, showing the respect to the people that are already lined up and have been, to the best of my recollection, bumped at least once, maybe twice already for Monday. Also speaking to the importance of these witnesses, not just the respect we need to show them to make sure that they are there Monday and that they get a chance to present their witness testimony. But by the same token, with regards to the amendment, I think it's only fair, that we show that same level of respect to the people that we would be inviting for that 1 hour on Monday afternoon after Monday's meeting. These are very, very busy public servants. And I can tell you that I rarely ever on the next business day have openings in my calendar, so they will need to move their schedules. And perhaps they can do that. Perhaps we can get them the headsets. Perhaps we can get the sound checks. Perhaps it can be done on Monday. But with regards to the amendment, I think that if we're showing the same level of respect to Monday's witnesses for the 2 hours of the first part of the meeting, we should show the same respect to people that we would be inviting to that meeting for that 1 hour period of time. I guess that's prior, and I'm looking for a nod from Luc. I guess that's right prior to question period on Monday. So not to veer off the amendment to speak on the motion itself, so I will come back on that. But that would be my concern with the amendment on Monday. Don had said that this perhaps and I don't want to put words in his mouth, perhaps isn't an emergency, but is urgent. And I think that I have the clarity. I think I watched enough of the newscast to get the clarity between the different the NACI comments and the Health Canada comments. But I think it's important that not only do we as a committee get that clarity, we get that for Canadians as well, so that, as it's been said already, we make sure that we don't contribute through calling emergency motions to that concern that Canadians may have. It's important that Canadians know that these vaccines are safe. So with regards to the amendment, I will listen to the debate on the amendment, and I want to thank Luke for those very thoughtful comments about making sure that we show a high level of respect to the witnesses. I know that Don spoke about wanting to make sure he gets a chance to question the president of Pfizer Canada. That's important. I always enjoy hearing Don's questions and hearing the testimony that comes out of those questions. So I want to make sure that we have that on Monday. Cognizant again of the clerk's comments about no open slots on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays because of the committees all sitting. I'll certainly listen to the comments that we have on Monsieur Thériault's amendment. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. We go now back to Ms. Wempel-Garner, please. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So just responding to a few comments, just with regard to the timing, the reason why we had put March 8th as the target date for this meeting was because we had submitted the letter to have the request for this meeting on March the 2nd. And since there are no parliamentary committees scheduled this week or to sit this week, I think there was one other 1064 motion. It was our assumption that this meeting that was happening today could have happened much earlier in the week, and that out of some miracle, maybe we could have been having those officials before our committee today. So, the timing that we included in that was with the hope that you, Chair, could have gotten the meeting, like we could have passed this motion and had the meeting prior to the resumption of the meeting on Monday. There's no intent to bump witnesses on the Monday. There was an intent to have it done this week, but clearly that didn't happen. So now we're in this situation. To my colleague Don, my comments around Parliament not sitting this week was not, just to be clear, was not to imply that we weren't working. Certainly, it has not been the case for me, and I'm sure everyone's nodding here as well. It's just that there are no parliamentary. I meant to say that there was no parliamentary meetings scheduled for this week, so there was no other opportunity to address this matter. The other thing I want to note, Chair, is that I believe that AstraZeneca has declined to appear before this committee as well. That was another reason why we wanted to have officials in front of this committee on this matter, given that AstraZeneca has declined to appear before the committee on the vaccine portion of the existing study, as well as we've already had NACI and Health Canada appear on this. It would have been nice to sort of have this conversation. Like, it would have been nice if those two bodies had given this information to the committee prior to it hitting the media, but such is life. So, there's no intent here to bump witnesses. Again, it would have been nice to have this meeting earlier in the week, given that there's been 4 days since we submitted the letter, but here we are. So with that, my colleagues, I think I can speak on behalf of my colleagues in the Conservative Party. We are fine having this meeting. It needs to happen next week. It can't happen weeks from now. So to Mr. Thériault's motion, I want to make sure that we have sufficient time to question the witnesses. I don't care when it happens. I would just like it to happen next week. So if the clerk is saying that we could do a 2-hour meeting after our meeting with the minister on Friday, that is fine. To Mr. Thériault, if you would like to do it on Monday, that is fine. And then just to the comment that these officials, that it's unreasonable for us to be requesting them to appear, or the assertion that it would be unreasonable to have them appear in a short period of time. I would just point to what Mr. Thériault said. These officials were out in the media this week presenting findings and responding to media inquiries on this issue. They should be, I think that they would themselves say likely that they are prepared to respond to parliamentarians. So to me, at this point, I think the firm Non-negotiable for Conservative members would be that this meeting happen prior to the end of next week. I believe that there is precedent for meetings to happen in the evenings, even on a parliamentary sitting week. And certainly, as the chair has, or the clerk has already mentioned, that it could happen after the meeting with the minister on Friday of next week. I just note that every day that we delay on this is a delay that the Astra vaccine is potentially being delivered, that we don't have clarity on this issue, and the Canadian seniors don't have clarity on this issue. And to Mr. Davies' point, I do not want vaccine hesitancy to be an issue in Canada, and it is incumbent upon our committee to provide information to Canadians so that they can make choices, positive choices that lead to the uptake of vaccines. So I hope that provides clarity. I think we can come to consensus. As long as this meeting happens next week, I'm good. I think Conservatives are good. I just don't want this dragged out longer than that.
Thank you, Ms. Rumpel-Garner. I should point out that a meeting request received on Tuesday, the earliest this meeting could have happened would have been yesterday. And in any case, to have the meeting with the witnesses requires 2 days notice beyond that. So Friday was never possible. I will go now to Mr. Davies. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to speak to Luke's amendment, I think it's something worthy of consideration. I mean, first of all, I need to know if it's possible for us to have an extended meeting, and the second consideration would be whether we're talking 1 hour or 2. If I understand Luke's amendment, it's to extend our meeting on Monday.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davies, your mic, move it down, please.
I'm so sorry. Let me start again. I said I think Luke's suggestion is something worthy of consideration. I'm unclear whether or not the committee can be extended on Monday, and if so, if that's 1 hour or 2 hours. And I would prefer 2 hours because I'm not sure that 1 hour is sufficient. The other points I want to make is I take Michelle completely at her word when she says it's not her intent to bump witnesses, but the practical reality is that's the impact of this motion unless we can find a different spot. I'm gonna go back to the very first motion that underpins our COVID study, which is the COVID study that we have has a process in it that is intended to allow every party to have its turn in addressing the issues of concern to it. And every time we delay this process by having more and more meetings, it means Luke's priority and my priority keep getting pushed into the future. And some of that's unavoidable. I don't mind that. If there truly is a huge issue of importance, that's fine. Obviously, when the minister comes and we have estimates, that's another issue. We're always subject to potential legislation coming, so I understand that can happen. But when members of this committee put issues forward that have the effect of, in effect, scheduling more meetings under their issue, it has the impact of delaying when we get to Luke's issue and my issue. I would remind all members as well, there is a process in the motion that we passed that if someone believes at the end of their 4 meetings, and it doesn't have to be 4, I realize. In this case, we're in the Conservatives' priority of vaccines, which was also my first priority, by the way, where we agreed to the maximum number of meetings for those witnesses, which is 4. And there is a process built in for this committee to have additional meetings after that by unanimous consent. And so if at the end of those 4 meetings, we believe that there's further witnesses that we would like to hear from, and I think this is a classic example where we would, I would support hearing from witnesses on this issue. I would just remind us that process is available to us. Now, it's fraught with some political risk because it requires unanimous consent. This process using a 106 just requires a majority support, but it has the effect of giving the Conservatives more meetings under their priority, that not following the process that we have in our motion. And I just want to make that clear because I'll put on the record here, I'm not supporting any more 106 meetings unless they truly fall under the rubric of urgency or importance. Because, and again, I don't cast any aspersions about this motion. I think that it's well intentioned. I think that it's timely and important. But the trouble is where does that end? I mean, on vaccines, we could end up having 13 meetings on vaccines through 106s because it seems that every week, every day, there's an issue of importance on vaccines. So I just want to remind us that of that process that we have in the committee and remind everybody that other parties are waiting to get to our priority issues as well. And we're only on the second priority of 16 that have been identified. Now vaccines happen to be, I think, an extraordinary priority. So I personally would support having extra meetings if that's the way we go. The last thing I want to say is I just heard from our whip. I'm aware that I've been made aware that there are extra slots that are available for this committee and for any committee. They occur on Thursday nights and they occur on Tuesday nights. And I understand that the Thursday night slots are booked for next week. Tuesday night I couldn't do. But what I'm going to suggest as well, after we deal with Luke's issue, if I think it's important to put this on now so that we understand what our full options are, is that we could, this committee could reserve one of the slots, the night slots, the following week on either the Tuesday or the Thursday. Now I hear Michelle say that her request is that the meeting be held this week, but you know, if it can't be scheduled without bumping anybody, then I would support having this meeting the following week on one of those open slots that is available. And perhaps the clerk can advise us right now because my whip seems to know when those slots are available or not. So perhaps the clerk can advise this committee of what slots might be available the following week in those extra slots. And that might help us make when we know what all the options are before us, when we can best schedule this meeting. But so I do want to also hear from the clerk, is a 1 or 2 hour meeting after the meeting on Monday possible?
Yes, it is. From 1 to 2 on Monday would be possible. And also the week after, it's a break week, so we have a lot of options there because the office is not sitting.
Let's just call it a constant week, okay?
Yeah, but...
Sorry, clerk, if I may, is that just 1 hour is available on Monday, not 2?
Well, because they're QP at 2 o'clock, so I guess we'll have to end there because we'll be available, but the QP members will want to attend QP, so...
Thank you.
I'd like to jump in here and comment on Mr. Davies. You know, the 106.4 process does not give the committee any extra powers. We're still bound by the motions we passed. We're still bound by the House motion and so forth. The 106.4 is only about getting a meeting called. When we're in that meeting, what we do in that meeting is bound by our routine motions and any other motions we pass. So anyway, just after that clarification, we'll go now to Mike. Mr. Kellaway, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. And this is a really good discussion. So I thank Don for his comments and MP Davies and MP Terrio. And I'd also like to thank Michelle Rumper-Gardner for some clarification as well. For me on Monday, an hour, I would rather have 2 hours for this particular topic. I think it's really, really important. And I also don't want to bump anyone in the process. And I think we got some consensus there, at least I think we do, among my colleagues, that we don't want to bump people. So that's really encouraging. So if we could look at a time that's 2 hours, whether it's after the minister on Friday, or it is something that is break week or after the break week, it would be, I think, really important because I think we could do a deeper dive in 2 hours, because when we look at it, usually an hour is, by the time you get some things checked, it's about 5 to 10 minutes, 10 maybe pushing it, but 5 to 8 minutes before you get the sound checks in, or somebody may arrive late, or whatever the case may be. So it is an urgent issue in the sense of ensuring that people like my mother, for example, understand the the backstory here and what is real and what is maybe hyperbole or whatever the case may be. So I really like what I'm hearing from MP Davies and MP Terrio. Again, what I think would be great is we could look at 2 hours, and if we looked at it, and I'm not sure as the clerk just said, you know, the next offering in an evening or after the minister on next Friday. But I think 2 hours would be an important piece for us to look at, given the urgency, and to ensure that we get the answers that parliamentarians want, and also that Canadians want, people like my mom. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Kellaway. Dr. Pawlowski, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do something constructive here, and rather than just making a comment, and that's trying to put together an alternate motion, because I think, I don't know if anyone else has seen, I know I texted my colleagues, news has just come out that Johnson & Johnson has been approved. So this I think materially alters the need for the initial proposal, which I totally agree with, was a good proposal, and I think does address a very important question. And certainly the numbers regarding AstraZeneca are all over the place, because it's a whole bunch of studies and looking at a whole bunch of endpoints. For me, the most crucial study, and I think the most conclusive study, has come out of Scotland, where they've given AstraZeneca, well, they vaccinated over 1 million people, over 400,000 got AstraZeneca. My understanding, most of those were over 80. And after having received the AstraZeneca vaccination, I think it was after 1 month, it showed a 94% reduction in hospitalization, which was actually better than Pfizer, which was somewhere in its 80s. So I think the fact is that AstraZeneca will be approved for an older population, but now Johnson & Johnson's out there as well. So I think for the sake of Canadians, we're going to want some clarity, and hopefully at the national level, because I think Michelle has said quite rightly that what all the provinces do could be different. Why not to have and find out from NACI and from Health Canada what the recommendations are? But like I say, now that Johnson & Johnson's out there, is that going to be a separate meeting? As for, because I know I'm speaking to Luke's amendment, I'm agnostic about the amendment, but I think there's a bigger issue about what exactly we're going to talk about. My own, and I was trying to come up with some kind of alternate proposal, which would be to put 2 hours aside sometime next week to discuss the newly authorized vaccines and the plan as to which populations would get which of those vaccines and based on what evidence. But maybe I'm jumping the gun on that, but I thought I should point out the Johnson & Johnson approval, because I think that, and with Johnson & Johnson too, that brings up other issues. Okay, it too isn't as efficacious in preventing disease. However, the studies that came out show it was 100% effective, at least in the limited population they had, at preventing hospitalization and death. So there is a big question, like who's going to get which of these vaccines, and I absolutely agree with what everyone said so far, that I think that needs to be clarified. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. I'll just suggest to Mr. Davies that he check with his whip again on slots for Tuesday and Thursday. In the background, I've checked with my sources, and it's confirmed that there is no slots available on those days. So if you could please just check on that, Mr. Davies. We go now to Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I put my hand up thinking that the amendment might be dealt with by this point. So I'll take my hand down and I won't put it back up again until the amendment's dealt with. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone who wishes to speak still is speaking on the amendment, or do we wish to go and vote to a vote on the amendment? Mr. Van Bynum, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important that the public be informed. But I guess if we're taking a look at the sense of urgency, there are matters that are urgent and important, and there are matters that are important. I'd like to remind the committee that the decision to administer the vaccine to any specific group is made by medical professionals. In this case, it's made by the medical officer of health in my community for the regional municipality of York. There seems to be a bit of a tendency for us to micromanage the situation and not give the medical professionals the credentials and the credits that they deserve. And I'm sure that the medical officers of health have already been in discussion with Health Canada and the advisory committee on immunization. So while I think it's important, I think it's important enough to give it the time that it deserves, and therefore I would want us to make sure that we have the 2 hours available. But let's not forget that the decisions to administer the vaccine is in the hands of medical professionals.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. McGuire, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think there is urgency to this. Mr. Bynen may be right, but those professionals need to know the information that they're making the decision on, and that's what this motion's about. There's a conflict of interest, or not a conflict of interest, a conflict of facts here between NACI and Health Canada, and in regards to just the AstraZeneca. We have a number of vaccines that are being licensed in Canada, and that's great. But we also have a situation where there's been some conflicting information as well. So, pardon me. So I think we need to deal with the situation that's before us. And, if this vaccine is going to be going out and being used by sources in Canada, and I believe that there are areas that it could be, perhaps just not in those age over 65. But if we wait till week after next, then that's really putting 10, 12 days of vaccines in people's arms when we don't know what the efficacy would be of that. And I think that's the nuts and bolts of having this meeting, is to try to just clarify that for the public. I think that one of the things it's called for here is to make sure that we reduce vaccine hesitancy as much as we can. We want everybody to know that they can be secure in getting a vaccine in their arm. So that's why I think it's very important that this meeting be held at least next week sometime, early in the morning, late at night, after another meeting. I'm fine with just whenever it is, but I think for the public's interest, the sooner the better.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Ms. Sadu, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Don. Mr. Chair, we should be mindful of the fact that we are already in the middle of the study on the topic of vaccine. And there are other important topics in this committee want to study, as Don said, but this is what we have been saying during the last 1064 in a polite way. We were cognizant of these consequences. On Luke's motion, I agree that we want a full 2 hours, and that there may be more witnesses that we also want to hear from on this subject. One additional hour on Monday does not sound sufficient. We want to hear from everyone. And MP Luke Turio, we will want to hear a proper translation. As we said, technical matters should be clear for understanding. And we also want to hear from Health Canada, who approved the vaccines. So there are many other experts. We need to make sure proper headsets are available for these witnesses to allow to proper translation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sadu. Monsieur Thériault, allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Thériault, go ahead, please. Well, I'm not going to prolong the debate, but on this last point, it seems quite clear to me that from the moment that we consider that it's an urgent issue to deal with, this could have been dealt with for a 3-hour period and not 2 hours. The experts that we have during the first panel, they're experts, and we can ask questions with regards to our concerns. And as Mrs. Sidhu said, not only does Mrs. Quash, should she comment others, but they could have come on Monday. So there seems to be a consensus around a 2-hour meeting. I understand that. So in the alignment that I seem to be seeing, the amendment will be defeated. So I think that this would have been a good opportunity to not change the order of things. If we look at the motion adopted in the House, and could have taken the time on Monday to ask our questions in light of the Conservatives' motion, and we would have had the opportunity to set out things more clearly. But this being said, I would like to bring back what Mr. Van Bynen said, because it's important. We can't give the impression to the population that when decisions will be made with regards to vaccination among the 65-year-olds or older, that this will be strictly in function of but while using contradictory facts. NACI did its work at a certain period of time. Health Canada approved the vaccine, but there's a certain amount of time between the two decisions. And as I'm speaking, the Quebec Immunizations Committee is doing its own job. And it's the Immunization Committee in Quebec with the transparent data that are at their disposal provided by NACI, by the study that Health Canada did, and they will make a decision as to the vaccination strategy in Quebec. And same thing in Ontario and elsewhere. And there's no issue there with regards to contradictory facts. These people will make an updated decision based on the information available, updated information that they have to decide on the most efficient strategy. Now, in my opinion, we're still a little bit late. We are a little bit late when we look at our studies, and we now have to reassure everyone, including we have to be able to reassure people. I thought it was important to remind ourselves of what Mr. Van Bynen indicated. In other terms, what we are going to do during this meeting may not be determining in the decision made by the Quebec Immunization Committee. They're going to make their decision before our meeting, but this is why I was thinking that in 1 hour, specifically after 2 hours of expert witness testimony, we could have asked questions. And, so obviously I'm going to vote for my amendment, and I'll understand if it's defeated. That's all.
Merci, monsieur. We go back to Mr. Davies. Go ahead, Mr. Davies.
Thank you. What would be helpful for me is to kind of lay before the committee what all the options are, and then we can select the best option. The trouble with doing one at a time is we're not quite sure what the alternatives are. So what I'm hearing now is that here are the alternatives. We can have an extra hour on Monday after our meeting. We could have 2 hours after the minister appears on Friday. Or we could schedule a 2-hour meeting the following week, virtually any time, say Monday, the following break. So I really think that the best way to approach this is for us to sort of take a straw poll, which of those options are the best. I know Michelle was quite passionate about having it next week for sure. I think if we're okay with it being on Friday, I don't think it does a great deal of violence to the concept to have it the following Monday. I'm okay with either Friday or Monday, because I kind of prefer having it, I think, in the break week slightly, only because it saves us a 4-hour meeting at the end of a very busy week next week, tacked on to a meeting, gives us a bit of breathing space. The other thing that I'm kind of, I don't want to muddy the waters too much, but I'm interested in Marcus's comments about the Johnson & Johnson. I'm wondering if there may even be some considerations that we might want to fold in to have them appear as well. If we had this meeting the following Monday, I don't want to get too far afield here, and maybe that's unhelpful to complicate it, but that would give us a little bit of time to invite them. Not maybe we better not do that. That'll just complicate things. So basically, to me, it's between Friday for 2 hours or Monday, and I think that we should sort of try to find out from our colleagues those two are the will of the majority.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. We go back to Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Don. So can I be so bold as to ask the clerk whether we is it more convenient to do it for 2 hours Friday evening afterwards? Is a slot available on Monday? Just help get some clarity on some of the questions Don has posed. Apologies that we're not specifically speaking to Mr. Terrio's amendment, but others sort of I think we're having a good conversation on how we can move forward on this and how we can hopefully keep the whole committee happy. So I would ask the clerk if he could chime in. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, please go ahead.
Yeah, so for Monday, March 8th, we have 1 hour extra, so we could go until 2 o'clock. Friday, after the minister, we could go 3 to 5. And I was informed a few minutes ago, and then I have the information when I intervened earlier, that we could have a spot Thursday night, 6:30 to 8:30, Thursday of next week. And the week after, well, it's a break week, so it would be easy to have a meeting there. But Thursday night is... there's a time slot there, 2 hours, 6:30 to 8:30, available.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Fisher, I see your hand up again. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks to the clerk for that clarity. And I'm not sure what others think, but I think Thursday next week is difficult. I know if the committee decides on Thursday, so be it. But I know I'm very booked on Thursday and Thursday evening. I could do the extra 2 hours on Friday. And I don't mean this to sound like this has anything to do with being about me. I'm just suggesting that, perhaps based on the conversation that Don just had or his intervention, and I believe that Monday sometime, if the clerk says it's amenable, is also a possibility. Thursday is a little bit problematic, but again, it's not about me.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Davies, go ahead.
Well, I started to put my hand up before I heard Darren's comment about Thursday being difficult. But to me, my initial reaction was, let's grab the Thursday slot. It seems like it satisfies everybody. It satisfies Michelle's desire to have the meeting next week. It avoids having to move any of our meetings. It gets us out of a 4-hour marathon meeting on Friday. To me, it's perfect. And I understand, we're never going to get everybody's schedule to be perfect on this. But I'm going to, subject to Luke's, I know we're still dealing with his motion, so I apologize for that. But, if I could, I don't know if it's proper to make a sub-amendment or to make a friendly amendment to Mr. Terrio's motion, but I would move that we hold a 2-hour meeting to discuss the contents of Michelle's motion on the Thursday slot from 6:30 to 8:30.
Let's perhaps we can get to the vote on Luke's motion and then maybe consider that later if it's okay with you. Is that okay, Mr. Davies?
Yes, and are people hearing me properly through my microphone? I'm getting a message that my microphone is not working. Is it okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Mr. Van Bynen next.
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I have house duty on Thursday night.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Barlow, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Thursday would work for the Conservative team. We could make that work. So if we can get to some sort of consensus, and we're not going to get to consensus where every member can probably make it there, but if we are leaning towards that, maybe perhaps we could either vote on Mr. Terrio's motion now, or Mr. Theriault withdraw his motion and maybe put in a second amendment to look at the Thursday night that seems to be more amenable to more members. Just a suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. We'll get to the vote as soon as we have no one who wishes to speak to the amendment. And I see no more hands raised. So let us proceed to the vote on Mr. Theriault's amendment. Mr. Clerk, I would ask you to take the roll call, please.
Mr. Fisher,
No.
Mr. Kellaway,
No.
Mr. Polowski,
Malheureusement, non.
Ms. Sidhu,
No.
Mr. Van Bynen,
No.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Monsieur d'Entremont,
Oui.
Mr. McGuire,
Yes.
Monsieur Généreux,
Oui.
Monsieur Theriault,
Oui.
Mr. Davies,
I just want to be clear, this is the motion to have a 1 hour meeting on Monday? That's what we're voting on? I'm not hearing.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, we are voting on Mr. Theriault's amendment, which is for Monday, adding an hour on to Monday.
Got
Okay.
it. No, I vote no.
So, Mr. Chair, yeas pour 5, nays contre 6. 6.
6.
So the amendment does not carry. We go now back to discussion on the main motion, and I have Mr. Davies still. Are you?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I would move that we hold the meeting called for in the motion on Thursday at the time slot identified by the clerk, which I believe was 6:30 to 8:30 Eastern.
Thank you, Mr. And I'm wondering the motion calls for. Okay, never mind what I just said. We'll go forward on discussion on Mr. Davies' amendment. Mr. Fisher, go ahead.
Once again, Mr. Chair, I put my hand up to speak to the main motion, and then Mr. Davies moved another amendment. Notwithstanding what I had said before, Thursday's not perfect for me, but again, it's not about me. But can we? And I hate to continue to harp on this, but I go back to the clerk again because I perhaps I wasn't listening, but I thought he didn't say that Thursday evening was available, but now I'm hearing that it is. So I hate to ask for even more clarification, but Mr. Clerk, you're certain that the Thursday evening is available?
Yes, I didn't have that information. Oh, sorry. I didn't have the information.
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk. I was going to help you out, but go ahead.
I didn't have the information, but I got an email saying that Thursday was free now, so that's why it was not mentioned here. Sorry
All
about
right.
the confusion.
Thank you.
So we're getting the information hot off the press as it comes in. So go ahead. Are you finished with your intervention, Mr. Fisher? Yes, go ahead. I'll say, Mr. Kellaway, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry if you hear construction going on. Apparently someone is digging a tunnel in my office, so I apologize for that if you hear something. I was just going to bring up actually what Darren brought up in terms of just getting, and it seems like we have clarity that Thursday is open. And that's assured. It sounds like that's clear. Thursday is open. That was the basis of my question, was to get confirmation that Thursday was open. It sounds like to the clerk that indeed it is open. So I was going to suggest Friday if Thursday wasn't, but I don't want to muddy the waters. MP Davies, through you, Mr. Chair. So I'll hang up now.
Thank you, Mr. Kellaway. I see no more hands raised, so we shall proceed to the vote on Mr. Davies' motion. Mr. Clerk, if you'd please.
Mr. Fisher?
I guess I'll vote against.
Mr. Kellaway?
Against?
Mr. Polowski?
Against.
Ms. Sidhu?
Against?
Mr. Van Bynen?
No.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Monsieur d'Entremont?
Oui.
Mr. McGuire,
Yes.
Monsieur Généreux,
Oui.
Monsieur Thériault,
Oui.
Mr. Davies.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair, yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So Mr. Davies' amendment carries. So the discussion now is on the motion as amended by Mr. Davies. And the motion as amended by Mr. Davies basically calls for the meeting spoken of in the motion to take place on Thursday evening. Ms. Sadu, on the motion as amended, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as I said that before, I'm curious to why the members who submitted the motion did not include any representative from Health Canada who approves the vaccines. I think we all want to listen from Health Canada. It seems like there are questions about the authorization of the vaccine. So this is important if Health Canada will be there. And I would like to amend the motion requesting that Dr. Spriya Sharma, the Chief Medical Advisor, and Dr. Mark Bertram, the Director of the Bureau of Medical Sciences, be invited to present in this meeting, and that they be given the same time as the NACI experts. I also think we should hear from some outside experts as well, and I have a list that should be considered. Dr. Cora from University of Calgary, Dr. Andrew Morris, Medical Director of the Antimicrobial Stewardship Program, and Carolyn Colligan, a mathematician and modeler at Simon Fraser University, Horatio Back, Dr. Hassan Masri, ICU physician and associate professor at the University of Saskatchewan, Dr. Joss Remer, MB Vaccine Task Force, and Dr. Ezek Bogosh, Ontario Vaccine Task Force, Dr. Dantua Skronsky, epidemiology lead of influenza, Dr. Krishna Shankar, the program manager of COVID-19 Resources Canada. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I was on mute. Ms. Sadu, did you wish to move an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I'll ask you actually to restate your amendment because it's going to be kind of hard for me to figure out exactly what the motion is. So you wish to modify, you wish to amend the motion as amended already by Mr. Davies to
Yes.
add certain witnesses. I
Yes.
suggest that's a very long list of witnesses. So anyway, please clarify what the actual amendment is.
Mr. Chair, you want me to read it again? I would like to amend requesting that Dr. Spriya Sharma, and the Chief Medical Advisor, and Dr. Barry Chuam, the Director of the Bureau of Medical Sciences, be invited to present in this meeting, and they be given the same time as the NACI experts. Also think we should hear from outside expert as well, and I have a list that should be considered. And that
Point on, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Généreux. Aren't we supposed to receive amendments bilingually? Aren't we supposed to receive bilingual copies of amendments?
Monsieur General, members are free to move motions from the floor, and we at that time we rely on translation services to convey the amendment in the other language. So, Ms. Sadu, your amendment to add members from the public health, Department of Health is good, but then you went on to say, and I think that. So I'm not sure that's part of your amendment.
So-
And if you have another list to add, I don't know if you want to add that as a different amendment later on, or.
Sure, Mr. Chair, that is the consideration, but I will send that list to Mr. Clerk.
Okay.
I have a point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm not quite clear on that. If Ms. Sidhu is moving a motion to alter the witnesses, which by the way, the ones from Health Canada I think is good. I don't think it's appropriate to say, and I'll send you a bunch of other names for consideration. The motion has to be certain. It has to stipulate what it is. I can't vote on 2 specific names and a list of other people to be considered. So I think we need clarity on exactly what the motion is.
Yeah. Right.
And point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order on that same point, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Barlow, go ahead on the same point of order.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I do believe we have a bit of a gentleman's agreement, or in the standing orders, on how many witnesses we can have per meeting. And the witness that Ms. Sidhu, or the witness list that Ms. Sidhu read off is quite significant. So if she's going to propose additional meetings on this issue, then that is a whole another. It's more than just an amendment. So I'm, as Mr. Davies said, I am fine with her first group of additional witnesses at the meeting, but to list off, a dozen other doctors, that goes far beyond what I think as a committee we have agreed to in terms of the numbers of witnesses we would have per panel.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barlow. We're getting into debate here. So, Ms. Sidhu, I would recommend that you make your amendment end at the point where the you list the Department of Health officials, and if we want to add additional witnesses for some reason, perhaps that could be another amendment. I think it'll keep it manageable, but we also have to be cognizant that we only have a certain amount of time, and the more witnesses makes that problematic. In my view, the number of witnesses for a meeting on COVID-19 is actually prescribed in the House Order of October 26. One witness per hour per party. However, our practice has been on these special meetings, specially called in this way, to set that aside and go with a list of witnesses as agreed in that particular motion. Anyway, so the amendment, as I understand it from Ms. Sidhu, is that we add public health officials to be giving the same, Public Health Agency of Canada, I believe, officials. They give the same amount of time to speak, and Ms. Sidhu gave a list of those officials to invite, and if I could see if you're nodding your head, Ms. Sidhu, if that's what, okay. So are we all clear on what the amendment is at this point? Don, Mr. Davies, I see you shake your head. Are you?
Yeah, just please state who are the witnesses that we seek to add?
Okay, Ms. Sidhu, one more time, please.
Sure. So I would like to amend the requesting Dr. Supriya Sharma and Chief Medical Advisor and Dr. Mark Witten, the Director of the Bureau of Medical Sciences, be invited to present in this meeting, and they be given the same time as the NACI experts. That is it.
Thank you, Ms. Sidhu. Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I just ask for clarification? Would those be the 2 most specific people who can explain the Health Canada rationale? Is that the purpose of who these 2 are?
Ms. Sidhu, if you'd like to respond.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we can now carry on the discussion on Ms. Sidhu's amendment. So, Monsieur Thériault, vous voudrez parler?
Mr. Thériault, would you like to speak to the amendment? Yes, Mr. Chair. So, I understand Health Canada, but I don't really understand everything. There was a list of independent experts. I would just like to raise the fact that we discussed for an hour the opportunity or the lack of opportunity to be able to question 2 organizations for 1 hour or 2 hours, and here we would add a series of people, and we think this is possible in a 2-hour period? Well, I thought we needed 2 hours in order to question, according to the motion, the Conservative motion that was tabled, 2 organizations, witnesses, that we add Health Canada, fine. But after that, I don't see why we wouldn't need several more hours for all these other experts. I don't really understand the thinking here. And I would like to see the list before I vote.
Monsieur Clarifier, Monsieur Thériault pour.
Mr. Clerk, to clarify, the other expert witnesses are not included. It's only the witnesses from the health department. Sorry for my French.
Dr. Sharma from Health Canada and Dr. Marc Berthiaume. Donc, il y aurait 2 témoins, Dr. Sharma et Dr. Berthiaume.
There would be 2 witnesses, Dr. Sharma and Dr. Berthiaume from Health Canada.
Donc, on parle plus du reste de la longue liste.
So we're not talking about any other experts or a long list. We're not trying to overdo this. Okay, fine. I very much agree with having Health Canada at the table, and I think a 2-hour period would be sufficient.
Merci, Monsieur Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Fisher, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I got my clarity there. Thank you for that intervention from both Sonia and from Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Okay, so we have no hands up after Mr. Fisher. So we shall proceed to a vote on Ms. Sidhu's amendment. Mr. Clerk, please.
Mr. Fisher,
Wait.
Mr. Kellaway,
Wait.
Mr. Podolsky,
Yes.
Ms. Sidhu,
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Monsieur d'Entremont,
Oui.
Mr. McGuire,
Yes.
Monsieur Généreux,
Oui. Excusez-moi.
Monsieur Thériault,
Oui.
Mr. Davies.
Yes.
So 11 yeas, 11 pour, 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So Ms. Sidhu's amendment carries. So we go back to the main motion as amended by Mr. Thériault and is further amended by Ms. Sidhu. So on the motion as amended, is there any
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. It was as
discussion?
amended by me, not by Mr. Thériault.
My apologies. We go back to the main motion as amended by Mr. Davies and subsequently amended by Ms. Sidhu. And sorry for that error, Mr. Davies. So we are resuming discussion on that motion as amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing no hands raised, I shall ask Mr. Clerk to conduct the vote once again. Please go ahead.
Mr. Fisher,
Wait.
Mr. Kellaway,
Wait.
Mr. Podolsky,
Yes.
Miss Sidhu,
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Monsieur d'Entremont,
Yes.
Mr. McGuire,
Yes.
Monsieur Généreux,
Oui.
Monsieur Thériault,
Oui.
Mr. Davies.
Yes.
So yes pour 11, 11, nays, contre, none. Aucun.
Thank you. Sounds like we squeaked it in there. Congratulations. The motion is passed. I'd like to thank everyone for all their work today and good discussion. Mr. Clerk, I hope certainly please go ahead and lock down that meeting slot for us. And all that being the case, I think our business is done here. So
Mr. Chair, I just had one quick.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes,
go
thank you.
ahead.
Just one quick comment or mention of a bit of business. We saw that the law clerk sent out his note the other day that he does not have the contracts that the government of Canada has signed with the vaccine companies, which we asked for in a motion a couple of weeks ago that was passed. Is my understanding that the U.S. chair and the clerk have put together a letter to the government to request that information. Has that been done, and can the members of this committee get a copy of that letter?
So I've received a letter and I've signed it and sent it back to my office. It will be getting back to the clerk ASAP, and we will send it out imminently. And once the clerk gets it, he can distribute it to the committee as per our normal process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep.
And thank you all. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and thanks to translators for all the abuse we put them through.
Have a good weekend, folks.